Now, this is really important to understand concerning this staff because you see it everywhere. You see it imposed on ambulances, you see it at the pharmacy, you see it at the hospitals, you see variations. Sometimes you see the staff of Mercury instead, or the staff of Hermes. But in Greek mythology, the rod or staff of Asclepius is also known as the Asclepieion. It is a serpent entwined rod that is wielded by this Greek deity known as Asclepius. According to the ancient Greco-Roman religions, which are now known as mythology, Asclepius was born in Thessaly, in the middle of Greece, where the first Asclepieion was established. The Asclepieion was a term used in ancient Greece to define a type of temple devoted to the deity Asclepius, which acted as a healing center. Asclepieions, or temples to Asclepius, are considered to be the origins to the Western world's first hospital. The fact that the Asclepieion, a temple to the son of Apollo, was the original hospital is well accepted in the medical community and can be verified on various government sites such as the PubMed site and other well-known medical sites online. This notion is actually without dispute in the medical community. There were around 300 Asclepieions in the ancient world, the most important being Epidaurus in Greece, which is also the world's first psychiatric hospital. The Hippocrates text and advanced surgical tools have been found at excavations at Epidaurus. The Asclepieion of Epidaurus gave birth to many other Asclepieions throughout the Greek and eventually the Roman empires. These hospitals were well known throughout the ancient world. In fact, the second most important Asclepieion is located at the base of the Pergamon Acropolis in Turkey. And yes, this is the same Pergamon that is mentioned in the book of Revelation. So let us read the quote in Revelation chapter 2, verse 12. And to the messenger of the assembly in Pergamos write, he who has the sharp two-edged sword says this, I know your works, and where you dwell, where the throne of Satan is. No doubt the largest attraction in Pergamos was the Asclepieion, the ancient hospital, or as Revelation chapter 2 verse 12 seems to imply, possibly the very throne of Satan, which makes sense again because the symbol of Asclepius was the serpent, the old serpent in Greek mythology. The serpent is a wise being that brings healing and brings all types of delights to humanity. Whereas the serpent in our scriptures, the Nachash, is an enchanting warlock serpent that does witchcraft and uses pharmakeia or drug sorcery to deceive and ensnare the entire earth, which is what we literally see happening. So that's interesting. The fact that Yahuwah, who is called John, the writer of the book of Revelation, was well aware of the cult of Asclepius and his cultic worship at the Asclepieion, the ancient hospitals cannot be ignored. In fact, this key helps us understand many of the potent prophecies throughout the book of Revelation. Patients coming to the Asclepia would take cleansing baths before entering the main Asclepieion. Inside there, they were examined by the priests and were issued certain areas inside the Asclepieion. Sacrifice and offerings were made, usually in the form of gold, silver, or even marble sculptures of the body part that they wanted healed. Sometimes coins were tossed into a sacred spring. The priest invoked suggestive prayers, invoking a spirit of prophecy from the deity. Inscriptions found in marble plaques describing treatment of some diseases and the sum of money paid for every treatment have been found. These were the first medical records and fees in ancient Greece. Patients followed many instructions from the priest, taking daily baths, exercises, massages, and even entertainment, attending theater. Special diets or fasting would take place, along with the use of many kinds of pharmakeia or medicine that were prescribed. The main diseases treated in the Asclepia were chronic neuropsychological disorders, skin diseases, and chronic lung diseases. Eventually, the patient would be given the opportunity to sleep in the most sacred chamber of the hospital, or Asclepieion, the temple, to Asclepius. And this sacred chamber is referred to as the abaton. They would be put into a hypnotic state there, likely using hallucinogenics. And there in the abaton, they would incubate dreams. The abaton was a pit where they would lay there in a hypnotic state to have some type of dream or out of normal conscious state where they could report those dreams or visions to the priest, and he would use the interpretation of the vision or the dream to prescribe the appropriate medication or the remedy that would be used from the dream. This Greek word abaton is very interestingly close to the Hebrew word Abaddon. We saw, of course, that Apollo's name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. But in Greece, his sacred chamber, his son's sacred chamber to incubate dreams for healing is called an abaton with a T sound, not a D sound. However, you can hear this similar wordplay. Surely there's a reason for that. There has to be some connection, and I do believe that it's obvious because in the Hebrew, the word Abaddon refers to a pit. In fact, it often is correlated with the word Sheol, which means grave, which is oftentimes translated as hell, but it literally just means grave. But for instance, in the book of Proverbs, chapter 27, verse 20, hell is what the King James Version says, which is Sheol, and destruction, or Abaddon, are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. There are several other verses where Sheol and Abaddon are mentioned as being places together, so I'm not going to go through all that right now. But the point is there's a connection. So Abaddon is some type of dark, destructive place, or malak, or both, okay, depending on how you interpret scriptures. It seems like it's both, that has to deal with Sheol. So it is classically understood, of course, that if this is Apollo, who is Abaddon, the destroyer, then of course this is likely the Satan. Or depending on how you understand the text, there could be many Satans. There could be a few Satans, actually. But the classical Satan, okay? So this is really all very important to understand how all this worked. Because, again, at the Asclepieion, they worshipped the serpent. They literally worshipped the snake because they believed that Asclepius could manifest in this form. In fact, they believed that a giant serpent would visit in the form of Asclepius, and they would worship and offer sacrifices to this serpent, which again is just a metaphor for the Satan. Giant non-venomous snakes were allowed to roam totally free in the Asclepieion, as Asclepius, the son of Apollo, was always associated with serpents for so many reasons. One reason being that they used viper's venom in various healing rituals. The deity supposedly appeared to a wealthy man in Pergamon and prescribed that he should drink every day of the drug produced from the vipers and should anoint the body from the outside. The venom of a viper, being deadly in the bloodstream, can be safely drunken, however. So this was often used as a medicine. The use of poison as a remedy by the Greeks is most likely why the term pharmakon meant drug, medicine, and poison in ancient Greek. The serpent was thought to rejuvenate itself by the shedding of its skin, and rejuvenation and healing were synonymous with serpents and physicians. Anyone who was healed was required to offer a sacrifice and bow to the idol of Asclepius and the serpent, the Nachash. Asclepius was said to have healed so many people that Hades, the deity of the underworld, complained to Zeus that he would upset the natural order of death amongst the mortals and challenged the immortality of the deities. For this reason, Asclepius was struck down by Zeus, After the death of Asclepius, he was placed amongst the stars in the constellation known as the Serpent holder. And according to some versions of this tale, he was eventually resurrected and placed as a deity on Mount Olympus by Zeus. Now, some of this information is not really all that important. I've given you some of this information just to kind of really fill in the gaps so that you understand the history, because it is a rich history. And again, some of this information isn't going to pertain to you today directly to know that there were giant non-venomous snakes crawling around the Asclepieion and that people incubated the dreams. But the reason I want you to understand these things is that people didn't believe that Apollo was just some deity way off in the heavens somewhere. They believed that he was prophetic. Matter of fact, he had a prophetess at Delphi where he would speak through her oracles. She was called an oracle. And, you know, this is all well known. So the worship of Apollo and Asclepius and Hygeia and Panacea, this was a prophetic type of worship. And this is something I also want to emphasize to you, because they were seeking dreams and visions from false deities and receiving them according to their testimonies. So there was that part of it. But then the straightforward, obvious is the poison, the injection. You know, when you think about the poison of a snake bite, and the fang goes into the flesh and injects that poison, it's so perfect that Nachash would mean sorcerer, and that it would also point to pharmakeia when you think about it in those terms for these last days concerning the snake bite.